Of all of the great Final Fantasy titles, 8 and 10 seem to have the most controversy, maybe other than 13, with some of the fans calling these games amazing, while others bash these titles for their stories and characters. Today, I'm going to be focusing on the 1999 title Final Fantasy VIII, released on the PlayStation 1 by Square. In my opinion, I think people bash this game a little too much. Yes, it certainly has problems in the gameplay department, but I certainly don't think that the story and characters are quite as bad as people say, though, yeah, there are a lot of issues. Final Fantasy VIII follows the quest of Squall Leonhardt, a teenage loner who's part of a military academy. Squall and his childhood rival, Cypher, duel on a stormy night. Both are cadets at Balam Garden, a military academy training CD, an elite mercenary force contracted to help people all around the world. The duel ends with a tie as both leave with scars across their faces, as the next morning, Squall wakes up in the infirmary on the day of his CD exam. He glimpses at a mysterious girl who seems to know him and then leaves with his instructor Quistis. Quistis aids Squall in retrieving his new Guardian Force, a creature that enables him to use magic and enhances one's physical capabilities, and then deems him ready for his final exam. From there on, the story kind of goes on its own thing. There's an assassination plot, betrayals, love, loss, prison breaks, witches, time compression, so much more. It's really kind of a strange plot compared to other Final Fantasies, and really think about that statement. This game is weird compared to a game where you stop a meteor from destroying the planet, or a game where a clown takes over the world. It's very different. This game doesn't have any real major goal like beating Sephiroth in Final Fantasy VII, but this game does have dog rockets attached to people's hands, so I can accept anything it offers. Common complaints about the story is that it's really illogical and the characters are all pretty stupid. Peter Panda said that the game's characters were weaker than previous games in the series. OWT Daft UK said the Junction System sucks, etc. I've watched Spoonie's review, or Let's Play, whatever it is, of the game literally dozens of times, and I know the story is pretty ridiculous. Some of the plot twists make M. Night Shyamalan look like Shakespeare, and I know the characters are kind of ridiculous. I know the dialogue is poor. I agree with all of this. But despite that, this is still a Final Fantasy game, people. The game looks and sounds amazing, there's a whole wide world to explore, and the gameplay is flawed, but it's not that bad either. All I know is that this game kept my interest for over 40 hours right until the end, and it kept my attention really well, so it means that I had to have done something right. I especially don't understand a lot of the flack the main character, Squall Leonhardt, gets, or, as our good friend BrainJuice654 calls him, Squall Emo Heart. He's really not a bad protagonist at all, I think. Sure, he starts out annoying and emo, and he's kinda not as good as Cloud, but I guess that's kind of the point of the story, for him to change his douchiness. Cloud starts out his game as kind of a dick, but he changes. Ryudo from Grandia 2 is pretty unlikable, but he grows on you. And my point is that the long quest of an RPG is about watching your characters go through things and grow into better people. This is what Squall does. Like it or not, Squall is somewhat realistic and very similar to a lot of people I actually know. I could even identify with him myself, except for that stupid furry outfit. I know a lot of people said that the characters were kind of lackluster and not as good as the previous games, and I agree, but they're not bad. I like Zell was funny, and the rest of the group was okay too. They are all kind of one note, but again, I wouldn't say bad, just not as good as other games. Really, the only characters I didn't like were Rinoa because she was pretty boring, and the final boss because she kind of came out of nowhere and had no real sense of character. Also, yes, the story is ridiculous and rather unfocused, but it's still kind of fun. I kind of like not having a real goal because you can't easily predict where the story is going to go that way, and that was still kind of fun. You still get some funny scenes, there were some intense scenes, some good group interaction. However, yes, the main plot is pretty weak, especially some of the plot twists, like the one near the end where we find out how our characters were connected. That was pretty brutal. In any case, the story in Final Fantasy VIII isn't great, but I don't think it's bad either. I agree with Brain Juice. There are a lot of pretty significant issues in this game, from the Deus Ex Machinas, lackluster dialogue, etc. And I see all of this, and again, I agree. So why do I still think that this isn't a bad game? Maybe we'll get into a little more detail to clarify things. The gameplay is your typical Final Fantasy affair, aside from one pretty significant addition. The Junction System is kind of weird and ridiculous, okay? They were trying something different, but you do have to do a lot of pointless busy work drawing magic for all of your characters. It's about as fun as watching Say Yes to the Dress reruns, and it's kind of counterintuitive to get punished for using magic like you do in this game. Though I'd like to point out, like some of my fans did, this is a pretty minor issue. Yes, if you use a magic spell once, you'll lose one magic and you'll have to redraw it because your stats will go down, but that's really not that bad. It probably takes about 5 minutes. And yeah, it is kind of sucky that you have to draw a bunch of magic for different characters, but if you think about it, you really only have to junction magic for like 4 different characters. You don't have to do it for all of them because you can kind of switch the characters and their junctions around. The game really doesn't make it that bad. The point is, it's not that bad. Also, keep in mind that the game doesn't really care how much you level up. The game kind of scales levels to what level you are. So if you're like level 50, then the boss will be level 50. If you're level 60, the boss will be level 60. So levels don't really matter in this game. That means that there's no real need to grind for levels, so the Junction System is kind of the game's grinding in a way. They swapped out one busy work for another and tried something different, but the point is you don't have to do 2 types of grinding at least. I think the biggest mistake of the Junction System, which Spoonie pointed out, is how junctioning your magic to characters alters their stats so much to the point where there's no individual sense of character anymore, aside from their limit breaks, which really detracts from the experience. And yes, Marcus, you're right, this game is crazy exploitable because of the Junction System. It's easy to have a character with like a ridiculous amount of life really early in the game if you just know what spell to junction to his health. And there's a lot of little things like that in this game. The music and the graphics is where this game really shines though. This game was a huge graphical improvement over Final Fantasy VII, like ridiculously big. And there were full motion videos, more discs, all to make this world more real and interesting. I do really love the world this game creates because it doesn't really fit into cyberpunk or post-apocalyptic or fantasy settings, but it kind of throws everything in there. Normally that would be a bad thing, but this world is really cool. The character designs were memorable, the enemies were memorable, and the locations, like Brain Juice points out, were pretty phenomenal. This may just be nostalgia speaking, but Final Fantasy VIII has one of the best looking worlds on the PlayStation. The music was also pretty phenomenal, with many awesome pieces, though I don't think it was as distinct a soundtrack as Final Fantasy VII. Also, Eyes on Me, the game's vocalized song, is not a bad song, though the lyrics are really kinda weird. In any case, the music and the graphics may have been part of the reason this game hooked me, because this game was never an eyesore and I really wanted to see more. In conclusion, it's hard to say, but I'm kinda gonna cop out of the Final Fantasy VIII debate by saying that this game isn't bad or overrated, but I don't think it's one of the best titles on the system like some people say. I would say that 6, 7, and 9 are stronger titles, but Final Fantasy VIII still has a lot to offer. And although the story isn't strong, I think I can see that the characters are at least solid, and the gameplay, music, as well as the graphics are all still pretty good, though they certainly took a lot of risks and not all of them paid off. I can see how this can simultaneously be an average game to some and another's favorite game of all time. I personally think that, like many of you said, this game is actually kind of underrated now. In any case, if you aren't too concerned with story and just want a fun, good quality RPG, this is a great game for you.